I, 28F, am getting married to my fiancé Jake, 30M, in 3 weeks, and my family is imploding over what I thought was a reasonable decision. I need unbiased opinions because I'm starting to question everything, and honestly, I'm wondering if I'm losing my mind or if everyone else has gone completely insane. Let me start from the beginning, because this situation has layers that would make an onion jealous. Jake's sister Emma, 26F, has 3 kids, Tommy, 4M, and twin girls Lily and Rose, 8 months. Tommy is absolutely the light of our lives. He calls me Aunt Sarah, even though we're not married yet, and Jake lights up whenever that kid walks into a room. We've been planning this wedding for 18 months, and Tommy being our ring bearer was literally the first decision we made after picking the venue. Emma was thrilled about it initially, constantly sending us videos of Tommy practicing walking in a straight line and protecting the ring pillow from their family dog. The twins arrived last February after a difficult pregnancy. Emma had been on bed rest for the last 2 months, and Jake spent every weekend driving 3 hours to help with Tommy while her husband Mark, 27M, worked overtime to prepare for paternity leave. When Lily and Rose were born, we were right there at the hospital, crying happy tears and buying tiny onesies. I have about 200 photos of me holding those babies in their first weeks of life. But here's where things get complicated, and I mean really complicated in ways I never could have anticipated. The twins are what Emma's pediatrician diplomatically calls high-need infants. What this means in practice is that they scream. Not cry, scream. We're talking decibel levels that make you physically flinch, the kind of sound that triggers every adult in a 50-foot radius to look around frantically for the source. They've been evaluated by multiple doctors, specialists, lactation consultants, and even a baby chiropractor. Yes, that's apparently a thing. Everyone says the same thing. They're perfectly healthy, just incredibly fussy babies who will eventually grow out of it. The first few months weren't too bad because newborns sleep a lot, and Emma was still recovering, so family gatherings were smaller and more low-key. But as the twins became more alert and developed stronger lungs, every family event became an endurance test. Easter dinner at Jake's parents' house was the first real indication of what we were dealing with. The twins tag-teamed a 2.5-hour crying marathon that started the moment we sat down to eat. Emma tried everything: nursing, bottles, walking, bouncing, white noise apps, different rooms, taking them outside. Nothing worked. The entire extended family ate cold ham while shouting over the wailing, and by dessert, 3 families had made polite excuses and left early. Jake's 89-year-old grandmother actually took out her hearing aids and announced she was too old for this nonsense. Tommy, who had been so excited to show everyone his Easter egg hunting skills, ended up having a meltdown of his own because he couldn't handle his sisters screaming either. The poor kid spent most of the day hiding in his grandfather's study with noise-canceling headphones. That should have been a wake-up call, but it got worse. Jake's birthday party in May was held at a local restaurant with a private room. The twins screamed for 45 minutes straight during dinner. Other patrons kept staring, and I watched Emma's face cycle through embarrassment, frustration, and exhaustion. Mark finally took them outside, where they continued wailing in the parking lot. Half our party ended up eating their meals standing by the window, watching Mark pace circles around his car with 2 screaming infants. The restaurant manager eventually came over and asked if there was anything they could do to help, which was nice in theory but mortifying in practice. Emma started crying, saying she felt like a terrible mother, and Jake spent the rest of his birthday party reassuring her that it wasn't her fault while his celebration became family therapy. At his cousin Rachel's graduation party in June, the twins' crying was so intense that Rachel's neighbors called the police for a wellness check, thinking someone was being murdered. I wish I were exaggerating. 2 officers showed up asking if everything was okay, while Lily and Rose screamed in stereo from the backyard. By July, Jake and I started having serious conversations about our October wedding. We'd booked an outdoor venue in the mountains, chosen specifically for its natural acoustics and peaceful atmosphere. The ceremony site overlooks a valley, and sound carries incredibly far. You can hear conversations from the parking lot when you're standing at the altar. Our wedding planner, Jessica, brought up the baby issue during a planning session. She'd worked with us for over a year and knew Jake's family situation. "I have to ask about the twins," she said carefully. Outdoor mountain venues amplify sound in ways people don't expect. If those babies cry during the ceremony, it's going to be challenging. She showed us videos from previous weddings where crying babies had completely derailed proceedings. In one, the officiant couldn't continue speaking over the wailing and had to wait 5 minutes for the parents to remove the child. Another ceremony had to be restarted twice because guests couldn't hear the vows over infant crying. "I'm not trying to be insensitive," Jessica explained, "but you need to have a plan. Either the parents need to be prepared to quickly remove crying babies, or you need to consider childcare options." That conversation planted a seed of worry that grew over the following months. Jake and I started paying closer attention to how the twins affected family gatherings, and honestly, it was eye-opening in the worst way. At Jake's parents' anniversary dinner in August, held at an upscale restaurant, the twins cried so loudly that we were asked to move to a different section, twice. Emma was mortified, but she also seemed almost paralyzed by the situation. She'd bounce them, nurse them, walk with them, but she never actually left the restaurant, even when it became clear they weren't going to settle down. "I can't just disappear every time they cry," she explained later. "They're part of this family, too," which I understood, but watching Jake's dad try to give a heartfelt speech about 35 years of marriage while twin babies screamed in the background was honestly painful. The speech was meaningful and emotional, but nobody could hear it. Even the video Emma took was unusable because of the crying soundtrack. The breaking point came at Jake's grandmother's 90th birthday party in September, just 5 weeks before our wedding. It was held at the family's church fellowship hall, and Emma had assured everyone that the twins were going through a better phase. They weren't. Lily and Rose cried for 3 solid hours. Not constantly, but in waves, just when everyone thought they'd settled down, one or both would start up again. Jake's grandmother, who has hearing issues, kept asking people to speak louder, but even shouting couldn't cut through the crying. The worst part was watching Tommy's face throughout the party. This poor 4-year-old was trying so hard to be good, to help set up decorations and serve cake to relatives, but every time his sisters started crying, he'd cover his ears and look like he was about to cry himself. "Mommy, why are Lily and Rose always sad?" he asked Emma at one point, loud enough for everyone to hear. Emma's response, "They're not sad, honey, they're just being babies," didn't satisfy him. Tommy spent the rest of the party asking when his sisters would learn to be happy. Driving home from that party, Jake and I finally had the conversation we'd been avoiding. "Babe," he said carefully, "I love my nieces, but I'm worried about the wedding." I'd been thinking the same thing. Our ceremony was planned for 2 p.m. on a Saturday, right in the middle of what Emma called the twins' witching hour. Based on 8 months of observation, this was when they were most likely to have extended crying fits. "What if we can't hear our vows?" I asked. "What if the officiant can't continue? What if our guests can't enjoy the ceremony because of crying babies?" We'd spent $40,000 on this wedding. More than that, we'd spent 18 months planning every detail, dreaming about this day, imagining the moment we'd promise our lives to each other surrounded by the people we love most. The idea that it might be derailed by screaming infants was genuinely heartbreaking. But we also loved those babies. Despite the chaos they brought, Lily and Rose were family. The thought of excluding them felt wrong, but the thought of our wedding being ruined felt equally awful. After days of agonizing, we decided to approach Emma with what we thought was a reasonable compromise. The conversation happened on a Sunday afternoon at Jake's parents' house. Emma was there with all 3 kids, and remarkably, the twins were having a rare calm moment, sleeping in their carriers while Tommy played with blocks in the corner. "Emma," Jake started, "we need to talk about the wedding arrangements." Her face immediately tensed. "What about them?" I jumped in, trying to sound casual and reasonable. "We were wondering if you might be open to having a babysitter watch the twins during just the ceremony part. Not the whole day, just for like an hour and a half while we do the vows and pictures. Then they could join us for the reception when it's louder and more chaotic anyway." The silence that followed was deafening. Emma stared at us for a long moment, her expression shifting from confusion to hurt to anger in real time. "You want me to leave my babies with a stranger during my brother's wedding?" she said, her voice carefully controlled. "Not a stranger, Jake said quickly. We could find someone you trust, or maybe Mark's mom could watch them, or… You're asking me to choose between my children and your wedding, Emma interrupted. A real family wouldn't make me pick. I tried to explain our reasoning, the outdoor venue, the acoustics, the fact that 2 p.m. was peak fussiness time for the twins, but Emma wasn't hearing it. These are your nieces, she said, tears starting to form. Your family. And you're telling me they're not welcome at your wedding because they might cry? That's not what we're saying, I protested. We're not saying they're not welcome. We're asking for a couple hours of childcare so everyone can enjoy the ceremony. You could bring them to the reception afterward when… When what? When they're more convenient for you. Emma stood up, startling Tommy, who looked between his mom and his uncle with worried eyes. They're 8 months old, Sarah. They can't help crying. That's what babies do. Jake tried to mediate. Emma, we're not trying to exclude anyone. We just want to make sure the ceremony goes smoothly. What if we hired a babysitter to stay right at the venue? You could step out if they get fussy and… So, you want my daughters to be managed like a problem that needs solving? Emma's voice was getting louder now, and both twins started stirring in their carriers. You want me to spend your wedding day worried about disturbing people instead of celebrating with my family? The conversation spiraled from there. Emma accused us of favoritism, pointing out that Tommy was not only invited but had a starring role as ring bearer. She said we were setting a precedent that some family members mattered more than others, that we were teaching Tommy that his sisters were less important because they were difficult. You invited 150 people to this wedding, she said, but you can't handle 2 babies? What kind of family celebration excludes infants? I tried to point out that several of our friends had gotten babysitters for weddings, that it was actually pretty normal, but Emma wasn't interested in comparisons. Those weren't my babies, she said firmly. And this isn't someone else's wedding. This is my brother's wedding, and my daughters should be there. The conversation ended with Emma packing up the kids and leaving early. Tommy was confused and upset, asking why Mommy was crying and why Uncle Jake looked sad. Emma's final words before walking out were, I need to think about whether I can support a wedding that doesn't want all of my children there. That was 3 weeks ago, and the situation has only gotten worse. The family group chat, which used to be mostly photos of the kids and dinner plans, became a battlefield. Emma sent a long message the next day explaining how hurt she was that her daughters weren't wanted at their uncle's wedding. She wrote about feeling judged as a mother, about the message we were sending to Tommy about his sister's worth, and about the pain of being asked to choose between her children and family celebrations. Jake's mom immediately responded with support for Emma. Babies are part of life. If you can't handle crying at a family wedding, maybe you're not ready for the chaos of marriage and children of your own. That comment hit me like a physical blow. Jake and I have been trying to have kids for 6 months, something only his parents know about. The implication that we don't understand children, or that we'd be bad parents because we want a peaceful wedding ceremony, was devastating. Jake's dad initially seemed to understand our position. He called Jake privately to say he thought we were being reasonable, that 2 hours of childcare wasn't a big ask, and that Emma was being stubborn. But then Emma sent another message to the group chat with photos of the twins in their matching flower girl dresses she'd already bought, along with descriptions of how excited she'd been to have all 3 kids in the wedding. I picked these out months ago, she wrote. I've been dreaming of this day, imagining my daughter's first wedding, thinking about the photos we'd take. Now I'm supposed to leave them with a babysitter while their uncle gets married? How do I explain to them when they're older that they weren't welcome at this family milestone? After that message, Jake's dad changed his tune. He called Jake to say maybe we should reconsider, that family harmony was more important than ceremony logistics, and that we were being inflexible. The situation got worse when Emma's friends got involved. She'd been posting on Facebook about the stress of having difficult babies and the judgment she faces from family members. She never named us specifically, but the implication was clear in posts about family members who don't understand what it means to be inclusive and people who think babies should be hidden away when they're inconvenient. Her mom friends rallied around her with comments about how terrible it is when families don't support mothers, how babies should always be welcome at family events, and how anyone who asks parents to get babysitters for weddings clearly doesn't understand the bond between mothers and infants. One comment that particularly stung was from Emma's best friend. Some people care more about their perfect day than their family relationships. Really shows you their priorities. Jake was devastated by the social media drama. "She's talking about us online," he said. "Our friends and family are seeing this. People are going to think we hate babies." The extended family started taking sides. Jake's uncle called me selfish and bridezilla-ish at Sunday dinner, saying that in his day, people just dealt with crying babies and didn't make such a big fuss. Jake's cousin Sarah, different Sarah, confusing, I know, said she thought we were being reasonable, but Jake's cousin Mike said we were overthinking everything and should just let babies be babies. The worst part was watching the family dynamic shift. Jake's parents' house, which used to be a neutral territory where everyone gathered comfortably, became tense and awkward. Emma would come to family dinners, but barely speak to us. Tommy would run to Jake like always, but Emma would quickly redirect him to other family members. 2 weeks ago, Emma made her ultimatum official. She wouldn't be coming to the wedding at all if the twins weren't explicitly invited to the ceremony. Not just allowed to come if they happened to be quiet, but formally invited as guests with their own seats and inclusion in all wedding photos. "I'm not going to sneak around at my brother's wedding, worried about whether my babies are bothering people," she declared. "Either they're welcome family members, or I won't be there at all." This was devastating for multiple reasons. Emma is Jake's only sibling, and they've been incredibly close their entire lives. He'd planned a special dance with her during the reception, a surprise choreography to their favorite childhood song. He'd written her a letter to read the morning of the wedding, thanking her for being such an amazing sister and for helping him become the man I fell in love with. But worse than Jake's heartbreak was Tommy's confusion. This 4-year-old had been practicing his ring-bearer duties for months, had his tiny tuxedo hanging in his closet, and had been counting down the days until he could help Uncle Jake marry Aunt Sarah. When Emma told him they might not go to the wedding, Tommy had a complete meltdown. "But I'm the ring-bearer," he sobbed. "Uncle Jake needs me. Who's going to carry the rings?" Emma's response was to explain that sometimes adults make decisions that don't include everyone, and that Uncle Jake and Aunt Sarah had decided his sisters weren't important enough to invite. Which was not what we'd said at all, but try explaining nuance to a heartbroken 4-year-old. Jake called Emma the next day, begging her to reconsider. He offered to pay for whatever kind of childcare she wanted, a nanny, a family member, even Mark's mom, who'd expressed willingness to watch the twins. Emma refused every suggestion. "It's not about the money or the logistics," she said. "It's about the principle. You're asking me to hide my daughters because they might be inconvenient. That's not a compromise. That's exclusion dressed up as reasonableness." My own family has been watching this drama unfold with increasing bewilderment. My mom, who helped plan most of the wedding, thinks Emma is being completely unreasonable. "Sweetheart," she said during one of my tearful phone calls, "we've been to dozens of weddings over the years. People get babysitters. It's normal. It's considerate. The fact that Jake offered to pay for it makes Emma's refusal even more unreasonable." My sister Jessica went further. "Emma's weaponizing those babies to control your wedding day. She's making this about her feelings instead of your celebration. It's emotional manipulation, and Jake's family is falling for it. But even my family's support couldn't ease the guilt I was starting to feel. Was I being unreasonable? Was our desire for a peaceful ceremony really so selfish that it justified this family rift? I started second-guessing everything. Maybe we should just invite everyone and deal with whatever happens. Maybe the twins would have a good day and sleep through the ceremony. Maybe I was being a bridezilla, caring more about perfect acoustics than family inclusion. But then I remembered Jake's grandmother's 90th birthday party. I remembered Tommy covering his ears and looking miserable while his sisters screamed for 3 hours. I remembered restaurant managers and concerned neighbors and police wellness checks. I thought about our $40,000 wedding, our 150 guests, our elderly relatives who might not be able to hear over crying babies, our photographer and videographer who'd warned us about audio issues. The situation escalated further when Jake's extended family started changing their RSVPs. His cousin Mike and his wife decided they weren't coming if Emma wasn't there, saying they needed to support family unity. Jake's aunt called to say she was disappointed in our priorities and would only attend the reception, not the ceremony. Meanwhile, other family members started sharing their own opinions more forcefully. Jake's grandmother called Emma directly and told her she was being ridiculous, that she'd raised 5 children and managed to get babysitters when necessary, and that not everything in the world revolved around babies. "I love those twins," she told Emma, "but your brother's wedding isn't about them. It's about Jake and Sarah promising their lives to each other. If you can't arrange 2 hours of childcare for your brother's happiness, then you're being selfish." Emma's response was to post another Facebook status about feeling judged and unsupported by older family members who don't understand modern parenting. The social media drama intensified when some of Emma's mom friends started commenting on our wedding-related posts, leaving passive-aggressive messages about family values and what really matters. I had to make my Instagram private after strangers started commenting about how weddings are just parties, but family is forever. Jake was caught in the middle of everything, trying to maintain relationships with both his sister and me while planning a wedding that half his family might not attend. He started having panic attacks about the whole situation, wondering if we should postpone the wedding until things settled down, or elope, or just cancel everything altogether. "Maybe we should just give in," he said one night after another tense family dinner. "Maybe it's not worth destroying my family over." That conversation broke my heart. Not because he was wrong, necessarily, but because it felt like our wedding, our celebration of love and commitment, had become this toxic thing that was tearing apart the people we cared about most. I suggested family therapy, thinking maybe a neutral third party could help everyone communicate better. Emma refused, saying she didn't need therapy to know that babies should be welcome at family weddings. Jake's parents also declined, saying therapy was unnecessary and we should just work it out among ourselves. 2 weeks before the wedding, the situation reached peak insanity. Emma's husband Mark called Jake to try one more mediation attempt. He acknowledged that the twins were difficult, admitted that they'd been struggling with the constant crying, and said he understood our concerns about the wedding ceremony. "But Emma's dug in on this," he explained. "She feels like you're rejecting the babies and, by extension, rejecting her as a mother. She's taken this really personally." Mark offered a different compromise. He would take full responsibility for the twins during the ceremony, sitting in the very back row with a babysitter on standby, and would immediately remove them if they started crying. Emma could sit with the family and focus on enjoying the wedding without worrying about baby management. It seemed like a reasonable solution, but Emma rejected it immediately. She said it was still based on the premise that her daughters were problems to be managed rather than family members to be celebrated. She wanted them sitting in the front row with the rest of the immediate family, included in all photos and ceremonies without any special contingency plans. "If they cry, she said. "That's life. If people can't handle that, maybe they shouldn't come to family weddings." Last week, with 10 days until the wedding, Emma made another Facebook post that finally named us directly. She wrote about the pain of having her daughters excluded from their uncle's wedding, about feeling judged and unsupported by family members who cared more about perfect ceremonies than perfect love. "My brother is marrying someone who sees my babies as problems rather than blessings," she wrote. "I'm heartbroken that our family celebration has become about exclusion rather than inclusion. Tommy keeps asking if he's still the ring bearer, and I don't know what to tell him." The post got dozens of comments from friends and acquaintances, most supporting Emma and criticizing us by extension. Several people shared their own stories about family members who'd been unreasonable about children at weddings. A few defended us, saying that wanting a peaceful ceremony was completely normal, but they were outnumbered. Jake's mental health started deteriorating rapidly. He wasn't sleeping, was barely eating, and spent most of his time either arguing with family members or staring at his phone, reading Emma's social media posts and the comments from people calling us selfish and family-destroying. "This is supposed to be the happiest time of our lives," he said, "and instead, I'm losing my sister and nephew over something that should have been a simple conversation about babysitting." I started wondering if we were the villains in this story. Maybe we were being unreasonable. Maybe our desire for a peaceful ceremony was selfish. Maybe good people would just accept the chaos and find a way to make it work. But then I talked to our wedding photographer, who asked again about the baby situation because it would affect her equipment setup. When I explained the ongoing family drama, she was sympathetic but clear about the practical implications. "I've shot weddings with screaming babies," she said. "The photos from those ceremonies always show distracted faces, people looking toward the crying instead of at the couple. The videos are often unusable because of the audio issues. I'm not saying don't invite them, but you should know what you're choosing." Our officiant, Pastor Williams, also brought up the issue during our final pre-wedding meeting. He'd been doing weddings for 25 years and had seen it all. "I've had to pause ceremonies for crying babies more times than I can count," he said. "Sometimes it works out fine, the parents quickly step out and we continue. But sometimes, especially with colicky or difficult babies, it becomes the focus of the entire ceremony. Guests stop listening to vows and start watching the baby situation. It changes the whole atmosphere." He wasn't trying to influence our decision, just making sure we understood the potential consequences. But his words reinforced our original concerns and made me wonder if we'd been right all along. 5 days before the wedding, Tommy called Jake directly on Emma's phone. "Uncle Jake," he said in his little 4-year-old voice, "are you still getting married to Aunt Sarah?" "Yes, buddy, we are," Jake assured him. "Is Mommy still mad at you?" Jake didn't know how to answer that. "Mommy and I are having a disagreement about some grown-up stuff, but we love each other very much. Can I still be your ring bearer? I practiced really hard." That phone call broke Jake completely. He hung up and sobbed for 20 minutes, mourning the loss of what was supposed to be a perfect day celebrating our love with all the people who mattered most to us. 3 days before the wedding, Emma sent one final text message to both of us. "I'm deeply hurt that you don't see my daughters as worthy of being at their uncle's wedding. I never imagined Jake would marry someone who couldn't embrace the chaos of family life. We won't be attending any part of the wedding. I hope your perfect ceremony is worth losing your family over." Jake stared at that message for a long time before showing it to me. The accusation that I couldn't embrace the chaos of family life was particularly painful, given our struggles with fertility and our hopes of having children soon. "Maybe she's right," Jake said quietly. "Maybe we're being too controlling about this." "Jake," I said, "we asked for 2 hours of babysitting. That's it. We offered to pay for it. We offered alternatives. We tried to compromise. Emma made it all or nothing." But even as I said it, I wondered if we should have just given in from the beginning. Yesterday, Jake told me he thinks we should call Emma and invite everyone, babies included, and just deal with whatever happens. He's willing to risk our ceremony being disrupted rather than lose his sister and nephew entirely. Part of me wants to agree with him. Part of me thinks love means accepting chaos and imperfection. Part of me believes family harmony is more important than wedding logistics. But another part of me feels like we're being emotionally manipulated. We didn't ask Emma to choose between her children and us. We asked for basic consideration for our wedding ceremony. We offered compromises, alternatives, and solutions. Emma turned it into an ultimatum about family values and acceptance. I keep thinking about all the weddings I've attended where parents discreetly stepped out with crying babies, where families made arrangements for difficult children, where people found ways to celebrate love while being considerate of others. It's not unusual or unreasonable, it's just basic wedding etiquette. But I also keep thinking about Tommy's confused little face, asking why his mommy is mad at Uncle Jake. I think about Jake's heartbreak over losing his sister. I think about the empty seats where Emma's family should be, and the dance Jake will never get to do with his only sibling. Our wedding is in 2 days. The final head count is settled. The photographer knows there won't be babies to work around, and the catering is confirmed for a smaller guest list. Jake's been putting on a brave face, but I can see the sadness in his eyes when he talks about Emma not being there. Last night, I asked him if he regrets our decision. He was quiet for a long time before answering. "I don't know," he said. "I understand why we made the choice we did. But I never imagined it would cost us Tommy's ring bearer moment and Emma's presence at our wedding. I keep wondering if there was a better way to handle this." So here I am, 2 days before my wedding, asking internet strangers to help me figure out if we're the villains in this story. Are we really asking too much by wanting a peaceful ceremony? Is Emma being unreasonable by refusing all compromises? Or are we the selfish ones who care more about perfect acoustics than family inclusion? The twins are 8 months old now. According to Emma's recent Facebook posts, they're still in their screaming phase, still having daily meltdowns, still disrupting every family gathering they attend. Part of me wonders if we dodged a bullet, if our ceremony would indeed have been ruined by hours of crying. But another part of me wonders if we chose perfectionism over love, logistics over family, convenience over compassion. Either way, it's too late to change anything now. Emma's made it clear she won't be coming, and Jake's resigned himself to getting married without his sister there. Tommy's tuxedo is hanging in Emma's closet, unworn, and the ring-bearer position will go unfilled. I just hope that someday, when the dust settles and emotions aren't so raw, we can all look back on this situation and understand each other's perspectives. I hope Emma can see that we weren't rejecting her daughters out of malice, but out of a desire to have our vows heard clearly. I hope Jake can forgive both of us for putting him in an impossible position. And I hope Tommy can understand that sometimes adults make decisions that don't make sense to 4-year-olds, but that doesn't mean love disappears. Most of all, I hope our marriage can survive starting with this kind of family fracture. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Not the perfect ceremony, not the family drama, but the commitment Jake and I are making to each other and to building a life together.